first maneuver that we're going to do is what we call plate 1. And you're wondering why it's called plate 1 is because it's the first picture in the book. So in the masters, they not only explained everything, but they drew pictures. And it's really hard to determine a point A to point B in these pictures when they say, this is what you do. And then they show a single frame of the picture. So it's very interesting through the study of what we do is determining how do you get from point A to point B and where is that picture in that sequence. So after lots of study, we determined these are some of the maneuvers that they taught. It's a very simple maneuver. All I did was slightly put his blade aside and struck his shoulder, like this. Doesn't take a whole lot of effort. The only thing I have to do is make sure I step with the right foot, or actually that's my left foot, but the right foot I would go with. One last time we'll show that. Alright, from there, we go into what we call plate. Okay, it's plate 4. So plate 4 is, he's coming at my knees, so I need to do something about that. And then counter. Okay, as you can see in a real fight, I've just face planted my sword into his head. Okay, is it pretty? Not necessarily. It's not a lot of flourish as you're used to seeing in the movies with Conan, you know, doing his morning exercises versus that simple movement right into your opponent's head. All you have to do is slightly deflect his blade, one strike, you're done. From here, I was going to show you how to use that window guard we talked about earlier. So if he's going to strike at me, I will block and then quickly counter. I block here, I turn. Okay. It's a very simple flick of the wrist. Okay. Now, you can come to the other side and actually do the same thing. Okay. Now we're going to switch sides and show you that the other side. As you can see, with a quick flick of my wrist, I've taken the back of his head. And so, as the Italians believe, it's maneuverability and speed over the power that you can do. However, when power is necessary, there's a few things you can do. Okay. So we'll show this slowly. So we start in our falcon guard, okay? He attacks me, I come in, okay? And he's going to try and push my blade. From here, I grab his blade, pull, strike his shoulder, and then kick him to the leg. Okay? So we'll do this a little bit faster. Okay? As you can see, it's not always perfect. Now, when it comes to thrusting, you have this wonderful point, and we've only been showing you how to cut. For thrusting, we have three major thrusts that we do. We have what we call our quarter thrust, or quarter lunge. Okay. We have a half lunge, and then we have the full lunge. Just a bit more, okay? Now, to defend against this, it's exactly the same. So if Jordan comes at me and strikes for a thrust, okay, from here, all I have to do is turn the wrist. So that one more time. So there's some quick maneuvers that you can do to deal with your opponent. Now, if things get really nasty, you might lose your sword. So what are you going to do about the situation? That's when I try and disarm him of his sword, so that way he can't be a problem. So once again, Jordan thrust. Okay. So I'm here. From here, I want to try and get his sword from him. Okay. So I'm going to reach over, grab his blade, and twist it out of his hand. Okay. So we'll speed that up a little bit more and see if I can pull it off. It's actually really hard to do in a real fight. Probably smelling. Okay, now with Jordan with no sword, he's easy pickings. Hey, whoever gets fight. Now, we were not planning on sparring for you today because we didn't bring all of our gear. We moved along really fast. This is great. That means we're going to have more time to show you some of these maneuvers that we'd like to show you. But first, before we do some of the continuing maneuvers, I wanted to open this up to some question or answer if anybody has a question.
First off, thank you. You're showing me things that from now on, if I ever see the fight scene in a movie, just build amazing. When you spar, do you ever use real swords or how heavy are the real swords? Or use
You know, the real swords were about 3 pounds, and we never actually spar or fight with an actual sharpened blade for obvious safety reasons. However, we do have sharpened blades that we do what we call test cutting. And a test cutting is where they get a wooden dowel, which usually has the consistency of, say, a bone, and then they wrap it in a rice mat or bamboo matting, which is called a tatami mat. And it's a style that the Japanese use to do their test cutting, and it works so great, we use it as well. However, we have been known to use deer or pig when we have the opportunity. If somebody's doing a luau and wants a cut, a pig cut in half, it gives us great opportunity to get the feel and understanding of how the swords actually worked. Yeah. And when it comes to the movies, real quick, there's a great documentary called Reclaiming the Blade, and it's a great hour-and-a-half documentary that I would definitely suggest for anybody who's curious about swordsmanship in history and movies and how it's being reborn in Western culture. Yes, we teach classes, absolutely. So, you had a question, John? I was waiting for that question actually. How does this work against Japanese martial arts, he says. Well, I'll be honest, with what we practice mid-15th century, so about the 1400s. The Japanese, they really perfected everything that we know of what they did 150 years later. So it's really hard to sometimes compare the two by time period. However, by technique, it's the Italian style that we practice is just as fast and just as exciting as the Oriental. And I do speak from experience, so I did practice Kendo and Iai-Jitsu, so I understand the Italian, or not the Italian, I keep saying Italian, the Oriental aspect. And it's such a tough question to answer. I'm gonna kind of pop out and say I love them both. I really would say the longsword is far more versatile of a weapon than the longsword of the Japanese, which they call katana. And if anybody's curious, katana means sword in Japanese. Okay, so a lot of people say, "Oh, it's a katana sword." No, it's just a katana. So, yes, question. In a tournament, the protection we have is just slightly more than what we wear here. We wear what's called a gambeson, which is a historically accurate padded tunic. And then we make sure our elbows, knees, we have what's called a gorget, which covers our clavicles or our collarbones and our lower throat as an extra precaution because these bones break very easily at impact. Other than that, not much difference. We just wear a little bit more in the torso and on the neck. Yes, question? Oh, I didn't hear you, I'm sorry. Foils, okay. You know, foils actually came about in the 1600s, which is about 100 years or to 150 years after what we're doing here. So foils hadn't quite been invented yet, because foils came around more as a status symbol for the rich and the noble to show that they could still carry a blade. And then eventually schools popped up everywhere to teach them how to strategically fight with them, especially in dueling. So the actual battlefield art of using the sword pretty much died in the 1500s. Any other quick questions? And then we're going to show a couple of other quick sword maneuvers. Yes? You know, direct hand strikes are very common, and that is something that we actually practice against, mainly because we have what's called a cross guard. And the reason it's called a cross guard is because it looks like a cross. Something that the Western martial arts developed that the Easterns never quite picked up on is the guard, which is there to protect the hands and for additional maneuvers. A lot of Oriental weapons had a guard, but it was mainly there to keep your hand from sliding up the blade, not necessarily to keep a sword from sliding down the blade. However, in a tight position you could, but it's not necessarily designed that way by purpose. So we do a lot of hand striking, but in a real fight with a gauntlet on, it's like a clamshell. It's nice, perfectly protected, so if somebody came down on it, you would feel the impact, but there would really be no damage necessary. So most of the time in our sparring, when the hand is on the sword appropriately, we actually just disregard the hand as an actual target, unlike the Japanese, because the Japanese, in their armor, didn't wear heavy gauntleted hands, and so a good sword strike to the hand is great. However, the Italians love to take out forearms, so forearms are still good, juicy targets. All right. Okay, so what Jordan suggested is movie versus real. Now, a lot of people, are very familiar with movies and what the sword strike looks like versus what a real sword strike looks like. First, I'm going to demonstrate what a real sword strike looks like, and then Jordan will have fun and show us what a movie strike looks like. demonstrated there is how to quickly set aside the blade and strike the opponent before they can react. In a real fight, that's how it would look. Now in a movie fight, there's really 4 major positions that they use on film because it looks good. And that's what we demonstrated earlier, which is our 9 through 12, which is those very large power strikes.
The biggest thing to remember on, especially on that fake line strike, is a lot of times with movies what you see is
There we go.
So in the movies, most of the time when they come with that over-the-shoulder strike, they're going to bring it way too far back and bring it forward. There's one major problem with this. From there, before he has a chance to bring it through,
That is, actually, if you want to hold still there for the demonstration.
oh yeah?
So I'll also show you the difference between a movie strike and a real strike is Jordan's just going to hold still. He's just going to hold completely still. Okay? I'm missing him by about 4 inches. Okay? In a movie strike, they actually never go for an actual contact. However, if his sword's in the way, if he puts his sword up in the way, it looks really great. Okay, see how high I am? If I was to follow through, I'm going right over his head. But in a movie, he just puts his sword up in the way, looks great, and there's perfect safety for the actors. In a real strike, from that same position, okay, I'm going to be here, okay? From here, it's just okay. If I wanted to step, I'm taking a very short step because I don't want to hit Jordan, of course. But in a real strike, I'll demonstrate next to him. I'm here, even being that far away. I've cut 3/4 of them through the body without moving. Now the reason we start here is it's a straight elbow, wrist. If I'm here, it's shoulders, it's elbow, wrist. Okay, it's a lot larger movement, takes much more energy, and in a real fight, it's what we call telegraphing. And the reason they call it telegraphing is because the telegraph would come through the line way across the west, and then by the time you get to the other end, everybody along the way who had tapped into the telegraphing line knew exactly what the report was. It's kind of the same way with swordsmanship. If you start way back here, by the time you get to here, everybody knows what you want to do. And the goal is to not allow that to happen. Oh. Movie versus real. Here we go. This is a fun one. The wonderful I tie you up and we push away from each other. Okay, you'll recognize this. Okay, and then push away. Okay, so we come in, and then okay, great. Looks great for movies. Looks good on stage. Okay, in a real fight. Okay, as soon as I get here, okay, I don't want to go backwards, I want to go forwards, okay? Okay, and I finish them off. You always want to keep the momentum forward for the true art, because on a battlefield, the typical battle lasted 15 to 30 minutes. Okay, and that was per battle, not the entire battle. Some battles, as they call them, lasted up to 10 days. And that's not, I'm not talking about a siege, I'm talking about on the land, side against side. You know, fight during the day, break for lunch, fight during the afternoon, break for dinner, shake each other's hands, go to bed, that sort of fight. And that's how it actually happens. A lot of people forget that war was bureaucratic. It was about the money mainly. And it wasn't necessarily about who was better than who. So, but a lot of these techniques we've learned didn't actually come about on the battlefield at first. They were perfected on the battlefield. They came about first through what's called judicial fighting. Basically, you called my sister a what? And I don't like that. That's against my honor. And I am going to challenge you to a duel. Well, back then, duels were to the death. And they would actually go into a 25-foot diameter ring that was roped in so that you couldn't go anywhere. And they would actually start on their coffin. They would sit on their coffin that had been prepared for them ahead of time, and then they would fight it out, and whoever won would walk away. The other one would give him respect and put him in the coffin. And that's how it was, and that's where a lot of these techniques started. And that's why the Italians loved the idea of hit first, not later, is because in a judicial duel to the death, you wanted to be the one to disarm them and to get them in the coffin first. And one of the ways to disarm them, as I answered a question earlier, was the forearms. Take out the forearm, you take out the sword arm. And I'm going to quickly demonstrate that maneuver. Simple step to the side and a quick up strike to the arm. You didn't have to cut him too hard. If you notice, every time he's leading with his right arm, I take out that right forearm, what's going to happen? That sword's going to go to the ground, fight's over. So a lot of strikes weren't to take out arms and so forth. I guess that's another misconception of the movies. While you could take an arm off with a sword swing, most of the time it was just a simple cut that would finish the fight. So we also have some techniques that are designed unarmored, or unarmed. So if I had no sword and Jordan came at me with a sword, what do I do? And so we noticed that a lot of maneuvers come from here and strike. So I'm going to defend myself appropriately as Jordan comes at me with his sword and I'm unarmored, or unarmed, excuse me. So we do it slow first to show it, and now he'll speed it up a bit. So from here, he's going to go from a high guard position and strike downward. Okay. That's pretty straightforward. I know he's coming at me from above, so I want to get in tight and finish him off. But what if he's coming in from the side? Okay, this is what I do if he's coming at me from the side. So when somebody's stabbing you or coming at you from below or from the side, use your feet and get out of the way because it's too hard to defend yourself, especially without a weapon in your hand. Well, yeah, we're going to be over here at our booth for a couple of minutes afterwards, so you can ask any questions or anything you would like. This was a very basic demonstration today, so while we didn't show you maybe too much and it wasn't a whole lot to look at, we just wanted to do a general introduction into the historical European martial arts. Thank you.